Okay, so we're going to finish up the chapters of the Baroque period, looking at chapter 11, Oratorio and Cantata. Um, rather than me surfing the pages and doing that kind of thing, I'm going to summarize it for you while we do this table here. And I'm actually going to leave you to go and listen to the examples on MindTap and Cengage because if I put them in the videos, we get flagged in YouTube. It's happened again. Sometimes they flag it, sometimes they don't. Depends on which recording from the text we're using. So um, hopefully you've read through these chapters because you had to do the self-study quizzes and you're already familiar with a lot of this. Let's talk about what oratorio is. So oratorio, uh, it gets its origins out of opera. Operas were these sung dramas based on Greek stories of antiquity, gods, heroes, swords, war, that kind of thing, epic Greek and stories of antiquity, Roman, that kind of stuff. So oratorio is also a sung drama. They're similar at the beginning, except instead of Greek dramas, they're based on Bible stories. Basically, as opera became popular, um, this sort of is a side mutation or innovation. Different, same thing, different topic or storyline. Okay, just like movies, you can have some one genre be very popular and then something spins off to the side of it that's similar, but maybe the topics are slightly different. Um, where was it performed? Well, very similar. It had semi-private performances and then public performances. Semi-private. Remember what we mean by semi-private. Somebody funds it, puts it on. It's not like they're selling tickets to the public and you're invited to them. But there are also public performances where somebody is for profit and they're doing a production and then they sell tickets to the public. All right. How long is it? Yeah, it's about 2+ hours long. Similar, 50 sections, 40 sections, somewhere like that. Did they have acting in it? Well, here's an interesting one. Now, don't turn off and say yes and no and just fill that in. Listen for a second. It started off having it, but then eventually, right, it soon dropped the acting. Now, it's sort of a gradual thing. First they drop the acting and then maybe they drop the costumes and you just had a sort of semi-thematically decorated stage or something like that. So originally when it first started, yes, it was just like a Bible story opera, but then eventually they started to say no. And so instead of acting, the singers would stand there and maybe they would have accoutrements of the costume or the appearance of a set or something like that, a thematically decorated stage. But eventually, oratorios become sort of like a concert where you go and you see a decorated stage. For instance, the Messiah might be set up to look like, um, I don't know, like you might have um, a non-functional stage with a manger scene or place out where there might be the idea of like the Middle Eastern deserts where the shepherds were or something like that, paintings of angels up in the sky, but it does not functional. It's not interacted with. It's just there for flavor. And the idea is that um, you would know the story, and so you're there to see the music performed and understand that. So did it have costume sets and props and sceneries? Yes. And then no, again, same thing. It started with it and then it's like, no, we don't do this. Okay. This happened sooner. The acting went away almost right away. Eventually, over time, this drained off as well. Any notable composers? Well, Handel single-handedly owns this with the Messiah. He actually turned to oratorio in part of his career because operas weren't doing so well, and he became very, very popular for that. And this does not apply because it is not a cantata, right? Okay, there are other people that wrote oratorios, but Handel's have endured the test of time and have stayed famous and important in that regard. Okay, so what's a cantata? Well, a cantata is also a vocal piece of music, right? But and it's also made up of aria recitatives and choruses, and has some instrumental sections as well. But this is music for worship. Okay, it's not going to fit in here. In the Protestant church. I'm going to make a mental note to myself to make this table bigger. So back in the day, in the Baroque period, if you wanted to experience a cantata, you would go to church. It's not concert music. It wasn't then. It is now. Now we perform it as historical concert music, but it was functional music for church back in the day. And what are its origins? Well, it would be a religious theme, right? Whatever holiday was coming up, or a topic that was to be featured in church. But it is not a story in the same way. Now, it might be about something that has a story. For instance, you could write a cantata where the music was dwelling on the idea of the crucifixion or the birth of Christ, or maybe it could be about, well, anything. It could be about Ezekiel, or maybe one of the other Old Testament prophets like Jeremiah being incarcerated or something like that. But it doesn't tell a story. It's not a narrative like this. We're not going to watch it to have the story unfold. Rather, you take that event or that story in the Bible, and you write music around it topically, right? Where is it performed? In church, not the Catholic Church, Protestant church, right? How long was it? 20 to 30 minutes, right? 5 to 8 sections, right? 5 to 8 recitatives, arias, choruses, instrumental things, mixed together. The one in the book has 7, for instance, 20 minutes or so. Does it have acting in it? Nope, it doesn't, because it's for worship in church, right? Does it have costumes? Nope, not traditionally, right? Any notable composers? Yes, Bach wrote around 150, give or take. There's some that we know exist that we don't have anymore. They've been lost. Okay. Now explain the relationship of the chorale and the cantata. And this is worth taking a moment. So way back in the day, in the Renaissance, we had the Reformation and the Counter-Reformation. And if you remember from your study of that unit, the Reformation is when Martin Luther, who was a German priest, was excommunicated / defected from the Catholic Church because he saw a need to, in his mind, reform the practices. He felt that there were corrupt things going on. He also felt that the doctrine had detached itself, and the practices had detached itself from the people, and he wanted his questions answered. Remember, the theses are the questions that he nailed to the door. Anyhow, so that's where the Protestant or Protesting church, or the Lutheran, from Martin Luther, church comes out. And at that time, one of the things that they did when they reformed or reorganized their church in the protesting Protestant movement was, amongst other things, they said the music is too detached. It's in Latin. We can't understand it. The counterpoint is complicated. It's beautiful, but it doesn't do what we want it to do. And what they wanted it to do was to be for the people and enhance the spirituality of the people. And what they did was they wrote hymns, is what you would call them today. They would take a line of, they'd write words for the hymns. The one attributed to Martin Luther is "A Mighty Fortress is Our God," right? And they have Protestant sentiments like we're oppressed or downtrodden, whether it be the other church doing it to us or life in general is hard, but we will be faithful, sort of that rebellious / stalwart kind of thing. And so these are simple tunes. Hymns have very basic sort of melodies in them with sort of not just doctrinal, but attitudinal slant on being faithful. Um, and they were done in the native language, in that case, German. And now we have them translated into English and such. Um, so that the people would go to church and hear these things sung and understand them. And it was a tuneful, simple song, so they could um, learn the song. And then when they're back at home and they're doing whatever work needs to be done, and remember, life was all about work then, they had very little in terms of comforts, so they're working all the time to find food and to survive and that kind of thing. But you'd sing these songs and it would become part of your life. It would be a way of enhancing your day-to-day life with spirituality. And you'd sing them at church too. Well, that's that hymn, those hymns, and there's hundreds of them, um, are called chorales historically. And so the relationship between the chorale and the cantata is this. A composer, Bach, would say, I'm going to write this cantata, right? 20 to 30 minutes of music, 5 to 8 sections of vocal music and instrumental music, right? String them together on a religious theme for church worship to be performed in church, okay? And what they would do is often he would take a chorale, a specific hymn, right, the words and the music, and embed it in the music of the cantata. Sometimes it's hidden in there, some aspect of it, and you'll never know it. And other times it's explicitly stated. So when we're looking at Cantata 140 in the book here, it actually discusses it and says, well, here is the chorale or the hymn that was used for this cantata. And I hope you've heard it. We've talked about it and you've probably listened to it. So this basic 4-part harmony of choir and orchestra is the hymn. Now, the church leaders in the early church that wrote these probably just wrote the words and the melodies, or they just wrote the words and somebody else wrote the melodies. And then composers would come along and harmonize them in 4 parts, right? They would have the job of taking the melody and writing an accompaniment for them, and that's what they would sing. For the cantatas now, they would take this, Bach would take this and embed it in the music of the cantata. And so, for instance, it will say in here, it has 7 sections in the cantata. We're right here at the top of page 115, 6th edition. And it says the chorale melody, this hymn right here, appears in the 4th, 5th, and 7th sections explicitly. Often the chorale melody would be like orchestrated grandly and have all the instruments and things with them towards the end, like in this 7th section here, so that the congregation could sing along with the cantata at some point. And you think about it from an experience as a churchgoer. This song that you love, that's part of your culture, that you sing at home, that you sing at church service as well, is embedded and floats out of this beautiful music that you're hearing as part of the worship service. And then at the end, or close to the end, there's part where you can even sing along with it and have full orchestra and full choir and all the beautifully composed extra music on top of that. And it's quite an experience. So, but that's that's the relationship between the chorale and the cantata. Let me see if I can summarize that briefly as we put it on the table here, and then we'll sort of finish up. So chorales are hymns, right, written, words or music or both, by early church leaders in the Protestant church, right? They're part of the worship service. When you're not doing a cantata, you'd sing them, and you'd sing them at home, and they have words and such that would sort of inspire and motivate and permeate your life with religious virtues. Okay, so Bach would take, or chorale, cantata writers, mostly Bach is the one we're talking about, would take the chorale, okay, and so he would embed the chorale. Often that just means the melody, right? Melody in parts of the cantata. Usually, also sometimes featured, what do we call it? So congregation participation. It could maybe be invited participation or sing along right there. Okay. And you know, that's a significant thing because often when we say, oh, we pick a religious theme, that theme will come from the chorale. So they pick a chorale and what it's about and the words and all that, and that becomes the basis for which you build all your arias and choruses and things and recitatives around that, and then actually explicitly embed the music in it as well. Okay. All right, you're gonna have test questions that, see if you accurately understand what these mean. Now, this chart is not sufficient in itself. If you just go, oh, it's a sung drama, but you don't understand what that means, it's not good enough for the test or the class. You have to say, well, what does that mean? That means it's like a play, except instead of talking, they sing. And they take moments to do not just sing speak, which is recitative, but also actually take time to do songs and things like that about topics, right? If you just say, what are its origins? And you go, Bible stories, that's not quite enough. You need to understand what that means. That means that this grew up parallel or an offshoot of the opera stories, which were based on Greek dramas. And somebody said, well, why can't we do Bible epic stories as well? These are big, epic, you know, tales, right? That they're telling, right? And then you need to understand that the cantata is not that. It's the music that, I mean, it shares the same sort of musical DNA in terms of the parts and pieces, right? It has recitative, it has aria, it has chorus, but it's completely different, right? So review the table, make sure you have the right information here, but more than the table, do you understand why and what these things mean, right? Remember, when we say in church, we're not talking Catholic Church. Cantata is specifically a Protestant or Lutheran genre, right? Okay. Make sure you understand what a chorale is. And yeah, obviously you want to have this table accurate and you want to know it, but you need to kind of go one step further than that. Say, could I explain briefly what it is about all these things? Okay, that's it. Let's see. What else are we going to do now? We are going to have two more things as we get ready for the unit test. We're going to have composer days. So what I want you to do, and you'll have some assignments on this, but go start reading the composer biographies and expect a bunch of quizzes on their life details, right? So we have these beautiful, somebody had to make decisions and say, out of all the things that were important in Claudio Monteverdi's life for this text, what are we going to put in this half page right here, 2 columns, right? Well, we're going to have you read through and hopefully take enough quizzes that you can say, I know a little bit about these people, not just that they, he did opera, right? But a little bit about him and a little bit about things that went on in his life with regards to music. So we'll have composer days these next few days, quizzes specifically about there. I don't think I'm going to do a video for that. It should be self-explanatory with a little text, and then kind of like we did, scavenger hunts for pieces of music and stuff like that, or instruments and things. This will be where we're interested in all the details about composers, who they were. That we finally are at a place now where composers are important. There were none mentioned in the Middle Ages. We started to get a few at the end of the Renaissance with Josquin de Prez and some of the madrigal writers and Palestrina and such. But now composers are actually like, almost celebrities, and what they write is different from each other. So it's not just enough to say composers. Handel's a very different writer than Bach. Their life experiences changed that, the way that they approach music and how they write music and how they specialized and stuff. So we'll do that. And then finally, we will do unit test review. And again, I'm not sure that I'm going to do like a lot of videos on this, But let me come over to a screen share. And if you haven't already checked it out, so I'm here in the modules, Unit 3. There is a PDF here. It says Unit 3 test questions. And if you click on that, it'll take you to a PDF. And, you know, it's pretty comprehensive, but it's not anything different than what we've been talking about. When it says CDs, this is from an older class before everything went online. Just think MindTap, right? Be able to identify every piece, right, that are in your textbook for these chapters. Be able to tell the difference. If I play you aria, recitative, and choruses that you've never heard, say, well, this is a recitative because I hear this, this, and this, right? And then be able to differentiate between the 5 different tracks of Spring on your CDs. I might do a video about this because that's important, and maybe needs a little emphasis as well. Okay, and then things that you'll have questions on, you should be reviewing that. And I think we'll be shooting for unit tests this weekend. So, all right, have a great day. If you haven't got your chapter tests done, now's the time to finish going through your textbook and do that. Start looking at the composers and glancing over them so you're not caught completely unawares as we start to do composer day quizzes over the next couple days here. And we'll follow with the unit test review a little bit, at least highlighting some of these questions or maybe the listening parts, and then unit test. All right, salut.